All right, we're already on Module 4. Can you believe it? You're almost halfway through this course. There's only 9 modules total. We're going to be finished August 8th with this course. So today we're going to look at Chapter 7, and I'm going to go over hypersensitivity reactions with you. Let's look at page 122. A hypersensitivity reaction is basically what it sounds like. It's an unusual or harmful immune response to something that's normally a harmless substance. There are 4 basic types. I'm going to talk about type 1. But before I start discussing type 1 allergic reactions, let's look on page 123 at the table 7.5. These are important to know for your test and just to kind of get them straight in your head. So the table has the type 1 is examples are hay fever and anaphylaxis, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The mechanism, IgE binds to mast cells, release of histamine and chemical mediators is the mechanism, and the effect is immediate inflammation and pruritus. Same thing with type 2. ABO blood incompatibility just means when someone's having a blood transfusion, there are reactions from the antigens on the cell that cause cell lysis. They call the cell to either explode or eat itself. So look at the different types, look at the examples, mechanism, and effects of each different type. But today we're just going to talk about type 1. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk about the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, allergic reactions. So let's talk about the mechanism of injury. The first point I want to make is the causative mechanism. And I want to do this by sharing a story with you. My youngest son, the one with special needs, was started on soy milk. And we're going to put this in second heading because that seems to be always where I end up going, but that's beside the point. All right, so I'm going to share this with a story. My youngest son was started on soy milk initially just because his brothers had a milk intolerance, okay? So it wasn't that we thought he was allergic to milk, we just wanted to avoid some of the stomach troubles. So throughout his development, he was exposed to milk in different ways, through food that was cooked, some butter maybe in there, or um, maybe the kids, his big brother's Easter candy, something, and he would have an allergic type reaction. It wasn't severe, it was never severe, breaking out around his mouth, that kind of thing. A little bit of coughing and that kind of stuff. So this was the first exposure. We're going to use this as our example. There has to be a first exposure. The first time you're exposed to something is not when you're going to have the reaction. It's going to be any time after that first exposure. So once he was exposed, he developed IgE antibodies. They attach to the mast cells, which are connective tissue cells that you find in the mucosa and the respiratory and digestive tracts. This is why you have difficulty breathing, swelling in the mouth, and that kind of thing. So the major point for this is there has to be a first. Then, one day, we're talking around the age of 5, he got a hold of another child's milk. Before the teacher could stop him, he took a big drink. And within minutes, he started having coughing, GI upset. He was actually incontinent of stool. By the time I got there, I actually beat the ambulance. I was about a mile and a half away. He was already turning blue, and his respirations were very, very shallow. This was the re-exposure. At this point, those allergens attached to the IgE antibodies and caused this huge flood of chemical mediators like histamine inside the mast cells, and it went into the general circulation very, very quickly. These mediators caused vasodilation, increased capillary permeability, and as a result, there was severe decrease in blood pressure, bronchi and bronchial obstruction of airflow. Within minutes, there's loss of consciousness. Before we could get him to the hospital, he had stopped breathing. And this is just a typical anaphylactic reaction. That's the patho behind it. A lot of times you're going to see, nowadays you're going to see people with peanut allergies. There's life-threatening instances where in an airplane someone opened a package of peanuts and a child had a reaction. Some of these reactions are very severe and we have to really be cautious. Peanut butter isn't even usually allowed at school anymore. So in a milder form of an allergic reaction, not necessarily anaphylaxis, you get your nasal mucosa swelling, itching, mild pain from those irritated nerve endings. But anaphylaxis is obviously life-threatening. So when we go to look at the signs and symptoms, always remember the patho, because the patho will lead you to the signs and symptoms. And as I've said before, you don't have to memorize a lot of random facts if you can get that patho down. So we look at the signs and symptoms. They're all related to that vasodilation and the increased increased capillary permeability. I'm so tongue-tied today. So that is where we get the severe blood pressure decrease. That's where we get the bronchospasm, if you will. The bronchi and bronchioles are obstructed. There's no airflow. They get dizzy, faint, weak, facial edema, respiratory rest, and of course loss of consciousness. Um, After this incident, we had official allergy testing done. We knew just from trial and error what he could or couldn't eat. And of course, we didn't introduce milk on the scratch test because of his severe reaction. And we started carrying an EpiPen. And epinephrine is the one thing that can kind of reverse the anaphylactic reaction. And we've actually used it a few times since that time as well. So this is one of the main reasons that when we give an antibiotic injection to someone or antibiotics IV in an outpatient setting, we have to keep them for 30 minutes or so just to watch to make sure they don't have a reaction. You can actually have penicillin, say, every day of your life, and then tomorrow you go get it again and you can have this anaphylactic reaction. So just remember, as far as anaphylaxis goes, you have to have exposure first in order to have the reaction later.